Fantastic. Well, officially, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for your patience with the date change as well. I don't know about you, but that sideburn has been giving me the side eye, and I've been really hankering to crack into it, particularly considering how good the last ones were. And of course, we are joined by the incredible Angus tonight. To talk us through these drams. I think most everyone here is a rewards member. Most of you should be familiar with Decadent Drams and the brand and the story. If you ever want a refresher, there's a brand brief in our featured brands page. I think we got a few for the different brands and whatnot, and article talking about the new range of Decadent Drams. But I always love to take these opportunities to quiz Angus about how the progress of Kythe is going along. So we might get to some questions about how Kythe is going. But before we start into the whiskies and delve into the stories behind why they were selected, quick housekeeping to go over. You guys might have seen the virtual tasting housekeeping video we share in the Zoom link email. Goes over the pointers of 6 glasses if you got them, or if you're like me and don't, that's totally fine too. Please don't drink and drive. It's obviously the most important. We love your tasting notes in the chat. So please pop any tasting notes, any questions, anything at all in the chat. And I'm going to quickly go through the tasting order verbally so people at home watching back have a heads up. So we've got the Inchmurrin is first, the Miltonduff is second, Sideburn is number 3, Ardmore is number 4, the Loch Lomond is number 5, and number 6 is the Old Orkney. I'm personally very excited to see 2 Loch Lomond malts in the tasting lineup tonight. So let's crack into the first one, the Inchmurrin. And I might get Angus to start us off with running us through what the difference is, because Loch Lomond makes 13 different types of spirit, and I can never, like, I can't even barely remember their names, much less the like peating and the cut regime for each one of them. It's like a very complicated science that I don't even know
Yeah,
if they know.
I'm not sure even Loch Lomond know everything about what they've made over the years or how they've made it. Um, I don't know all the scientific ins and outs of that differentiate all the different distillates, and they also, by their own admission, make different versions of the different named spirits. I think if they wanted, like, I think they would have to have another 40 or 50 names on the books to differentiate all their different variations they make if they wanted to do it that way. Broadly, Inchmurrin is double pot distilled traditional single malt made as kind of a clone of the old Little Mill Lowland single malt, which that distillery closed in 1993, and it was under the same ownership as Loch Lomond distillery, and Inchmurrin was developed as a kind of clone of that malt for blending purposes. I believe it's made through their tall neck. They've got a sort of tall, thin neck still, and I think that one in particular is used for Inchmurrin. But they do other makes as well. So obviously Inchmurrin is a sort of fruity lowland style, but made at Highland distillery. And Loch Lomond itself is more of a traditional sort of fuller bodied Highland malt made again with double pot distillation, but using squatter pot stills to give a sort of slightly heavier, oilier, more full bodied distillate. I really love the modern production at Loch Lomond. It's another distillery where I always point to being a good example of how some distilleries have really improved in recent decades. There's plenty of distilleries you can point to that say that have become more boring or more homogenized in their output in recent decades with kind of the forces of modernization that have occurred in Scottish whisky. But Loch Lomond kind of bucks that trend, goes against it, because I think the quality of what they've made has improved, and the diversity of what they made has become more widely known and bottled and appreciated. Although their sort of commercial tack themselves now is just to focus on Loch Lomond as a brand, and they're not going to do so much with the different names, although they control the different names, and they'll put out Inchmurrin, but they'll probably bottle it as Loch Lomond and brand it as such. So that's, which I think makes sense, because Loch Lomond is such a famous name in Scotland and abroad, with it beyond, that transcends even whiskey. So it makes commercial sense for them to do this. Anyway, so yeah, this bottling here we're trying, Inchmurrin 12-year-old. It's just full term maturation in, I believe it was a second fill barrel. And this is a perfect illustration of why I love that Loch Lomond makes as they make them now. This to me is a very rare example of modern whiskey that exhibits clear and distinctive tropical fruit character. Tropical fruit is a characteristic which I think is very hard to find in modern whiskey, and people talk about it, but they don't really understand it, or I don't know. I think a lot of whiskies where people say, oh, this is quite tropical. It's not. 60s Bowmore, 60s Longmore, and 60s Laphroaig and earlier, they are tropical. This is a very unusual example of a whiskey that does exhibit some degree of tropical fruit. To me, tropical fruit in whiskey is where you start to notice individual and precise aromas that are things like mango, passion fruit, pineapple, papaya, guava, traditional, quite sort of exotic hot climate fruits. Fruit salad notes, it's where it starts to get gunky, funky, thick, pronounced, vivid. I think this Inchmurrin does display that characteristic. It's not extreme like it would be in some 60s malt whiskies, but it's certainly there. And it pairs very well with this other side of the character, which is quite modern. You've got this modern American oak maturation, but it's a second fill, so it's nicely balanced with the distillate, gives the distillate a lot of room to breathe. All we did with this was reduce it by about 2.5 degrees down to 57.1%, which is really just using a little bit of water to bring out and magnify that fruity characteristic while retaining the majority of the power and assertiveness of cask strength, and leaving plenty room for people to add further water if they want. This to me really shows the kind of the history and the DNA connection with Little Mill. If you've ever tried any Little Mill bottlings from the 80s and early 90s, the sort of final years of that distillery's production, they really present this kind of quite similar, exotic, quite green and grassy character as well. Another way to think of it is a bit like Irish whiskey. There's a lot of synergy between this and late 80s Bushmills or Cooley, for example. That particular characteristic where you've got these little exotic fruits, but there's also this sharp gooseberry, crushed nettle, grassiness, olive oil, impressions of things like New Zealand Sauvignon, where you've got that sort of tropical element, but it goes towards these sharper green fruit notes as well. So I find a lot of that characteristic in this. I think it's a very luscious, charismatic, vivid whiskey. It's one of my favorite things that we bottled in the last sort of 6 months, I would say, but just because I think it's fairly priced. I think it's very characterful, and it's exactly the sort of thing that I like bottling. Very fruity Highland malt whiskey that has a lot of personality. So I hope you all like it.
Yeah, it's super, super cool. Like I initially got a lot of tinned peaches and like tinned pears, like SPC type stuff. And then as soon as you said tropical fruit, the papaya jumped out at me instantly. But it does have that kind of that similar Dunnage funk to the way that kind of rum has that Dunnage funk. It's like it's fruity, but I can't
Esters.
describe how almost.
I'm sure it's just the behavior of unusual esters. So the way that Loch Lomond create these is that they don't just use distillers' yeasts. They'll often use alternative, like sometimes wine yeasts, sometimes rum yeasts. I don't think that's necessarily where the rum mental connection comes from, because I don't think just the use of rum yeast doesn't create rum flavor in whiskey, but I think what it does create is more interesting fermentation, which develops the building blocks of a more complex whiskey, and certainly the building blocks of much more pronounced fruit flavor, which is then quite skillfully concentrated and captured through that distillation process using sort of narrower neck stills with a bit more copper contact. So you're accentuating these higher sort of lighter, fruitier ester components from the fermentation, and that's the building blocks of what goes into the cask and matures on as the finished whiskey. So yeah, these Inchmurrins, I think they're just so lovely. It's interesting you just shared the labels there. We made a massive error on this, which I didn't notice until the bottles were finished, and on the online, it just says distilled at Inchmurrin Distillery, which is entirely my fault. This is exactly the sort of stupid mistake I seem to be incapable of not making when developing labels. Anyway, that's one vaguely interesting nugget about this bottling. But yeah, as I say, I'm super pleased with how this one's come out, and I think it's matured and developed really nicely. Nice to see positive comments coming through.
Yeah, lots of like Patrick's getting apricot jam, Michael getting orchard fruits. Ollie didn't get a kit, but that's okay. He'll probably snaffle the rest of mine when he's in town this weekend. But yeah, Travis, you've really found some excellent Loch Lomond casks. Just wait till we get to the 19-year-old. I've smelled it so far, and I can tell you I'm very, very excited. Glenn says takes you back to the apricot jam your nan used to make. Leo's getting overripe apricots and some kernels thrown in for that bitterness. Yeah, that there is that touch of like kernel pithy bitterness, but like a stone fruit bitterness. And
I definitely
yeah,
get like lemon and lime zest with the pith on. That kind of pithy citrus vibe is something I commonly find in Inchmurrin quite a bit.
yeah, 100%. So we'll move on to the second whiskey, and before I chat, if anybody hears crying or meowing in the background, I have 5 foster kittens. Please ignore them. They're very cute, but also should be sleeping right now. Tried to time this so they're asleep. So don't panic if you suddenly start hearing cat noises. It's me, not you. But also, we've got a couple of people who are fairly new to the Decadent Drinks brand. So as we tuck into the Miltonduff, Angus, do you want to kind of tell us a little bit about the ethos behind the Decadent Drams brand and
Yeah,
kind of
absolutely.
the amalgamation of all the years of work?
Yeah, so when we were doing our former series, Sponge, it was very like a sort of multi-tentacled Leviathan. It was cognac sponge, Armagnac sponge, and rum sponge, and all these different wine sponge, things like that. So it was quite sprawling, and that was part of the DNA of that brand. It was fun. It was, convoluted and a bit chaotic. And I wanted to do a brand going forward that would serve as our kind of, bread and butter catch-all workhorse brand that continued our creativity, continued using original labels, created a bit more broad room to be diverse with our creativity, but also worked as a catch-all brand for everything we did outside our kind of top-end single malts, which go into whiskey land. So it was really a way to do all our different spirits, but captured more neatly under one brand. So I came up with Decadent Drams just because I'm a sucker for alliteration, and it helps tie us with Decadent Drinks a little bit, our company name. And I felt this was just it made sense to me as a home for multiple spirit types and a way to be creative on quite a broad, open palette. It gave us lots of room to move about and try different things. And one of the core things I really wanted this brand to be was the chance to take each bottling as a fresh opportunity to design a label from scratch. So something you'll notice looking at the picture of these bottles is that, they're all completely original label designs, some of which are taking themes tied to the whiskies in question or the spirits in question, some of which are developed by inspiration from the flavor profiles, some of which take history and cultural references from the distilleries or in jokes about those particular makes in whiskey culture. Some of them just I go off in a totally different direction because I've got a specific idea I fancy trying, and I thought this is a nice blank canvas to play with that. So Decadent Drams is supposed to be a very broad, open series, creatively very diverse, and a home for pretty much everything we do outside, the sort of very expensive older malt whiskies. So it's really kind of our our day-to-day workhorse that should be a very rich and broad range of different wonderful spirits. And I think as it's gone on over the last sort of 6 months or so that we've been doing it, I hope that that's been quite evident in terms of the diversity of what we bottled and in terms of the way we've presented it. Hopefully that kind of emphasis of, creativity. And I think I wanted it to be quite a confident brand that didn't rely on a logo. It didn't rely on a fixed logo. It's just Decadent Drams, Decadent Drinks, and we have the confidence to make each label its kind of its own design in its own right. So something that I think over time, I go back to what I used to always think about with when we started doing independent bottling is I'm thinking ahead to how are these going to look on people's shelves all lined up. Whether they're open or not, it's just the idea that it's something pleasurable for people to have at home. It's aesthetically pleasing, it's fun, and it's humorous and joyful. And there's something on the rear label that's humorous and amusing for people to read. That's a little extra bonus when you get the bottle in your hand, get it home. All these little elements go into the thinking. So there's lots of synergy with what we used to do with Sponge, but just kind of refreshed and given a bit of a repurpose as Decadent Drams. So yeah, this one here is the Miltonduff. So Miltonduff, it's a multi-vintage, and it's quite an extreme example of this multi-vintage approach we take, where we take two casks of the same distillery, but different ages, different production eras, and mash them together. So this is a 2002, and it's a 2002 barrel mixed with a 1991 refill hogshead. I'm just double checking because I can never remember off the top of my head. It was second fill bourbon barrel, yeah. So second fill bourbon barrel from 2002 and a refill hogshead from 1991. And there was probably about 2/3 of it is the refill barrel and a third is the refill hogshead proportionally. And it's just married together and bottled at natural marrying strength, so no additional reduction. The natural strength of the whiskey, which was about 50. Again, I don't have this. I should be more professional in this and have this to hand, but yeah, just over 50%. And yeah, so this is again a good example of what we like to do, which is taking quite decisive decisions as the bottler to put our stamp on the product and create a product which would not otherwise exist without our decision making. But that being said, we're trying to do something which still creates a really elegant, characterful product that puts the distillery character front and center, is not too intrusive on the whiskey. Like, I'm not trying to add oak flavor. I'm not trying to use a finishing in a jarring way, which is going to create something imbalanced or vulgar. I'm not trying to use or deploy additive flavoring influences. I just want to do a bit of tinkering, a bit of marrying together in this case, using two quite distinctive casks, two quite distinctive profiles of the same distillery to create a really interesting rounded small batch that exhibits its own individual character. And again, this was one of these examples, I've often talked about this, where the two different casks on their own individually had something the other cask needed. And so the barrel on its own was quite rich, quite spicy, had actually quite a lot of wood influence for a second fill barrel. The refill was very honeyed, very waxy, but very low cask influence. So, and in a beautiful way, both lovely examples. But the refill going in on top of the barrel just brought extra layers because it brought the depth of maturity of greater age. It softened the wood character out, and it enhanced that really nice, juicy, textural waxiness. So what you end up with is something that has the kind of waxy, honeyed character of an older whiskey with a little bit of the spice and power of a kind of younger, more wood-influenced whiskey. And I really like Miltonduff. I think it's quite an interesting, charming Speyside. I think it's got a lot more body and weight to it than a lot of other Speysiders, and I think this is a nice example of that.
Yeah,
just refreshing the comments here.
Yeah, it's a little bit like fruitier. I got a little bit of like fresh lychee kind of sweetness, but I also on the nose got this kind of in Italy they have prosciutto on rock melon. Is it rock melon? No, sorry, honeydew melon. And it's got a lot of that kind of tone, that soft saltiness of prosciutto, but on that like really juicy melon as well. Leah's getting fresh floral nose, red apples on the palate, finish goes on and on and on. Yeah, I know. I can still taste it on my tongue. It's incredible. Patrick means in the best way possible, soggy Cheerios breakfast cereal and Fruit Loops flavored milk, breakfast whiskey. Amazing. Travis, characterful fruits, malt biscuits, ginger nut, bickies, wax, and some honey and unripe grapefruits, possibly kiwi. Ashley says fruity, racy acidity on the fruit palate reminds of an aged Riesling. That's a good call. The aged Riesling kind of those like
Yeah, that
yeah
honeyed
fruity.
toast and soft waxiness, and that yeah, I aged white wines generally, dry, good characterful dry white wines with a bit of age is a thing I get in whiskey a lot. Like I tend to get aged Chenin Blanc and some of these sorts of malts as well. I really like that kind of character. It's a nice description. With regards to that question about difference between refill, second fill, first fill. So if on the sheets when we buy a cask it's noted as second fill, then we'll put that on the label. Where we use the term refill is just purely that the cask history, the number of fills is not known, so it's listed as refill. And it generally means when you see just pure refill, it means it's probably third fill or more, been used 3 times or more. First fill will just be a barrel that's come from America that's been used to mature bourbon and is now being filled or has been used for the first time to mature Scotch whisky.
Yeah, it's always interesting. Like some of the bigger brands as well will just be like, oh, it's a refill of this. Um, it had held bourbon before, and I'm like, so it's a first fill. Sometimes they'll say first fill, sometimes they'll say refill, and it's just like, I suppose refills like a better catch-all term.
Yeah,
Yeah.
broadly, like there's loads of casks sitting in warehouses in Scotland which are just listed as a refill. Once you get past the second fill, the knowledge very frequently gets lost because casks get changed between companies and record keeping is not always perfect. Record keeping is much better now than it used to be because you've got digital software that tracks all these things, but historically there's still casks from previous decades which have been recycled, reused, and the knowledge about their history has been lost to the ether. So they're just sitting there as refills.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so interesting that you paired such a like an old and I say old. It's not that old. I'm not that old, but an oldish and a youngish Miltonduff together. Such like an incredible, it comes
Yeah,
together so incredibly.
I really like the result, and I'm always looking for opportunities to do that. I really like the effect of bringing together, using age and different ages as a way to create an interesting new character. Um, it's very difficult to do because, well, at this extreme where you start to go, 2002, which is already kind of approaching middle age for a whiskey, and 91, it's quite old. Um, and normally the price just becomes very prohibitive. And even when you communicate this to people, even if I, like if I had my way, I would be doing it with a 10-year-old and a 40-year-old. I think stuff like that is really fascinating. But first of all, you can't really get 40-year-old. And even if you could, the price of the 40-year-old makes a whiskey with an age statement of 10 years old costs several £100s or thereabouts, which for most people is a stretch. Like I can sell that to a few geeks that really like the idea as well, and perhaps are trustworthy enough in us and what we do to take a punt. But it becomes a very commercially challenging thing. It's something you can do in cognac all the time, much more easily. It's something that really belongs more in the world of French spirits, and because they've got centuries of tradition with that, they've developed the sales network and channel, and that's what they do. They blend all these different ages together. And there's been a bit of that in Scotland historically, but since the craziness of the last 20, 30 years, where this appreciation and demand for older, mature Scotch whisky has gone through the roof and made these casks and these parcels of stock extremely expensive, doing that becomes very difficult. So this was an opportunity I just saw because, first of all, the recipe worked really well, and the pricing on the 2 casks meant that I thought this could just about work. Um, I'm always looking for opportunities to do more of that, and we've got a few projects in the works which I think will be of similar interest and similar kind of distinctiveness and age differentiation. But it's is normally, as we'll see with the Sideburn in a minute, it's normally just two side-by-side vintages, or ones that are 2 or 3 years apart at the most. But it's really it's confined by pricing most of the times, not by interest or creative ambition. I'd love to do like crazy stuff. I mean, if G&M would just let me in their warehouse and do like a 10-year-old Glen Grant that is 5 casks from 5 different decades, that would be the dream. I would do that in a heartbeat. But
I
suspect
can't
that's not
even
going to happen.
fathom, like I can't even fathom how much begging and bartering you'd have to do for that.
I think it just won't happen. It's my guess. It's just very, very long odds on that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the multi-vintage kind of, it's almost, I want to say it's kind of become your specialty of what you do is these multi-vintage mixtures. And like clearly defining which barrels of which years went into each bottling. But yeah, the Sideburn's a great example of that, I think.
In all fairness, and to just to sort of speak up for my own critics at this point, it is something that's long been done. It's just that we have made a point over the last few years of saying that we are doing it and being quite explicit about it and making it part of our kind of our modus operandi. But it has been something that's gone on. It's just that in the past, it's been something that sits in the background of this shadowy world of blending, which is very closed, and they don't really want to talk about their practices and what they do. Whereas I'm the opposite. To me, I think it's something that everyone finds interesting, and so we should talk about it. And especially when it's done on a very small scale of just 2 casks together, then it becomes really part of the story, and it's integral to talk about it, in my view. So yes, we try to make it a bit of our thing, for sure.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, like pure malt as like the marketing term of pure malt didn't really come about until like Nika did it with like a lot of their products. And I know there were a couple of Scottish, I think Cardew did a pure malt and stuff like that. I feel like multi-vintage is just a new term for a specific type of blending whiskey barrels together.
Is the Miltonduff 50/50, or is there a younger percent? So it's about 60% 2002, 40% 91, give or take.
Yeah.
And then yes, Sideburn. So this is also multi-vintage, and it's called Sideburn because it's Burnside, which is, so it's complicated. Burnside is owned as a filling name by William Grant and Son, who produced Burnside, and as everyone believes, it is just pretty much Balvenie. It's probably Balvenie with a tiny bit of Glenfiddich or Kinninvie in the mix. But I've asked people at William Grant, and they don't seem to really know, or they won't say precisely what the truth is. I believe that there's some batches which are probably just 100% Balvenie, and they just call it Burnside and say it's a blended malt, just specifically for brand protection, whatever. But I don't believe that Burnside has been the same thing over the years. I think it has changed. But that being said, most of the Burnside I've ever tried has the character of Balvenie. It has this honeyed, waxy, lovely Speyside, juicy goodness, which seems quite specific to Balvenie. And anyway, I don't really care, because it's actually something as good as, if not better than, most official 30-year-old Balvenie at a much more accessible price. So this is, and then the complex part is Burnside, the brand name, is owned by Springbank Mitchells, who are protective of it and don't want anyone else to use it. So our first bottling of Burnside we called Burnside, and I got a letter from them saying, we can't do this. Well, that's not fair. I got an email, which is more polite than a letter. And I said, oh, I'm terribly sorry, because I had quite a few casks of Springbank that we needed to get out of the distillery. So I was very polite and said, we will never do this again. So I just thought, well, let's call it Sideburn and do funny Sideburn themed labels. So that's why Sideburn. And so this is really just a sequel bottling to an old sponge bottling, where we did 2 different vintages of Burnside, married them together, and sort of did a label themed around, there you go, label themed around sort of old 70s funk music album covers, and yeah, basically just having fun, nonsense, being silly, uh, just messing around with different themes, ideas, styles, as I want to do. So this is technically a blended malt, 31 years old, two different barrels mashed together, 1992 and 1993. Both of them refill barrels, I believe. I need to go back and check my sheets again. 1992. Yeah, actually, no, sorry. The 1993 is a first fill barrel and the 1992 is a second fill barrel. But both mixed together and bottled at natural marrying strength. So it's a cask strength whiskey. And again, I just think this is pure honeycomb. Waxes, honeys, flower nectars, just juicy, old school, mature, luscious old malt whiskey. So yeah, oaked, good buttery Chardonnay. There's another good wine comparison.
It's
I really love it.
fantastic. I feel like as well, like when you get Balvenie core range Balvenies that are like that old, there's usually a significant sherry influence, and I think that this is just such an incredible like kind of declaration of old Balvenie in bourbon cask or Balvenie in other. Um, yeah, just fantastic. Steve is skipping it so that he can do a side by side with his sponge burn side. Oh, sorry, Sideburn. Um,
Always a good idea.
yeah. Travis loves it as well. I remember when Travis bought that bottle and he was just like, "Oh, how is it?" And I'm like, "I wish I had gotten one. That's how good it is." And I feel like these are going to be just some of my favorites going forward. You still have access to quite a lot of these old casts, don't you?
Um, I, I I don't know. I know we have a sort of a source that owns some of this stock, but you just never know how long it's going to sit there for. One of the I don't know benefits of the market for whiskey being a bit slow at the moment means that it's more likely that we can hopefully secure some more of these for the longer term. But um, the short answer is I don't know. That it's quite a useful little supply opportunity where these casks are sitting, because they're sitting with someone that doesn't really want to sell them off in one go, but also doesn't really know necessarily what to do with them themselves. So it's a pretty good opportunity for us. So I'm definitely going to be bottling some more. There's another sequel to this coming up later in the year, which will be a 94 and 96 multi-vintage. And that one I'm really looking forward to because it's already marrying, and the combination is actually extremely fruity. Like it's got this kind of honeyed waxy thing that you see in this bottling, but it's almost a little bit exotic, and it's going more towards like really luscious, pronounced, slightly more youthful fruitiness. So it's a very juicy, lovely whiskey. So that'll be quite a treat when it arrives.
Yeah, I already saw Travis celebrating and very excited about it in the images below. But yeah, Patrick's getting subtle raspberry and honey. The raspberry's a good call. It's got that like slight tart raspberry thing. And yeah, Ashley with the Chardonnay, that butteriness, 100% totally correct. Leo waxy honey, a little white pepper on the nose. Side by side burn. Thank you, Chris, for contributing the dad joke of the day. Um, yeah, Travis reckons the Sideburn might be the best value whiskies you're releasing. I tend to agree. I think that Balvenie, I've always kind of said to people, if you don't like Balvenie, you don't like whiskey. And I think that the opportunity to get that kind of older, richer statement without spending a stupendous amount of money is always very welcome. So
I do think the value to quality ratio on these Burnsides is pretty epic, if I'm honest. I mean, they're still expensive bottles because they're old, but you know, I've done these side by side with official 30-year-old Balvenie not too long ago, and I mean, they are better. I don't want to be mean or anything, but like they are just better and a quarter of the price. So what's not to like. It's interesting, this whole value thing. We don't do much under kind of £90 a bottle mark, just because it's quite hard to find supply for things which are, still really good and interesting at that price point. There's an ocean of whiskey out there that I could be bottling, but we very deliberately don't, because I think it's a bit boring and a bit mundane. We're about to see that start to shift, because some supply that we bought a few years ago is starting to come online, and like the Loch bottling of Manachmore we've just released this month is really, really good. And that's only 85 quid a bottle. And then we've got this summer's Equinox and Solstice, which is Glenord 8-year-old, just pure refill maturation, but from some quite active refill hogsheads. And that's fantastic. And that's 65 quid a bottle. So those things are starting to appear. Later this year, something I'm working on, which I hope we can do it this year, is I'd like to do like core products for Decadent drinks. So like a Decadent Drams and an Old Orkney core product. And if we do them, I think they'll be quite eye-catching in terms of like the quality of the liquid and the price we can put it out at. But I've just never been wanting to rush to do those sorts of price points or products until I felt we could be quite competitive at a quality point as well. I really think anything we do just has to be, like, I think, really good for the drinker. It's got to be absolutely delicious. That's my it's been like my guiding principle, which is why we've sort of generally stuck to pricier products the last 5 years or so, just because that's actually the much easier area to find beautiful quality in. Sort of arguably lazy as well, but
Angus, there's plenty of core out there, and we've all followed you into your crazy world of the unique and wonderful what you're doing now. So please don't change. We love the direction you're going.
Oh, we won't change that much, don't worry. Everything will just be in addition. Equinox and Solstice bottlings continue. Yes, they will. I've no plans to discontinue that series. I really like that series. I love the concept. It's my little kind of hippie side project. We'll definitely keep doing that. And then what other comments have I missed here?
I think
all right, let's get rich. Yeah, okay.
Talking about some news of some investment whiskey barrel programs that turned out to be too good to be true, as most things are. But yeah, it's definitely a good time to be a whiskey drinker and have that steady stream of those Balvenis. But we'll move on to, I mean, look, in terms of affordable, delicious bottlings, Ardmore is probably one of, I haven't seen as many cropping up, but I feel like it's one of the most kind of accessible whiskies to bottle nowadays. Is that something you found?
Yeah, they released a huge amount of casks of Ardmore onto the brokers market some years ago, basically from every year from like 2008 onwards, I think. And then a couple of like massive drops from 1998 to 1997. So there's a lot of this stock sloshing about out there, and it's mostly very good. A lot of it's in ex-Lefroy casks. So Lefroy would be sent, because they're the same ownership under Beam, Lefroy would be maturing in first fill barrels, disgorging that, and they'd be sent to Ardmore for filling, which in some way is a bit of a shame, because the Lefroy peat really dominates. Although Ardmore is a peated whiskey, it just makes Ardmore a kind of diet Lefroy level of peat. Yeah, but that being said, I still really like it, because Ardmore is quite a heavy, charismatic, waxy, oily distillate with a nice farmyard character, which I love. All that stuff. I like character. I've always been a bit bewildered as to why Ardmore was not more successful or more popular or more expensive. But I'm not complaining, because it means that we can every so often just put out a really nice bottling of Ardmore. The problem is everyone's got them, so that's one reason why. And we've got other casks of them, which are often, broadly all very good, but because lots of other people do Ardmore as well, I try not to look at it too often. So, or try to come up with ideas for things that we could do that would differentiate slightly. So that's what we did with this bottling. This is something we had for ages. This 2009. It's a small parcel of 2009s, and I took one of them, which is basically my favorite cask of the little parcel, a few years ago, and put it into a very inactive butt, basically a totally neutral dead butt, which was massive, huge fucking cask. It must have been like 600 liters. And I thought, let's try to do a finishing which is purely about oxygen as an experiment, purely about air, and maximum headspace. So we just put this Ardmore 2009 to the bottom of this butt, and it was just basically barely touching the sides. So it was a huge amount of headspace, maximum air, and then just left it for about 2.5 years, wherever it was, I can't remember, until it was 15, and then just bottled it and reduced it. It held its strength really well. This is a very good, very tightly staved, thickly chimed old butt. So we found it was still up around about 58%, even after all that. And I thought we'll try to further accentuate some of these more elegant, smoky mineral characteristics by reducing it. So we brought it down to 53, which is a strength I use frequently because I think it works so well. Preserves a lot of the power of cask strength with the captured benefit of water, and presents the whiskey in the bottle for you, the drinker, in a way that we think makes sense. Which is, we're a kind of an interactive, interventionist bottler. That's our ethos. That's what we do. So this is a good example of that. I agree. I think it's a good value, 15-year-old named, very characterful single malt that we've done a couple of interesting things to. And again, an example of just trying to do something that uses air and neutral wood rather than uses just additive wood, which I think is kind of a bit easy and a bit obvious. So yeah, this bottling is another good example of what we're about as a bottler, the sort of things we like to do, our own personal tastes, which influence the decisions we take and the products we put out. And I think it's a lovely Ardmore. It's got that farmyard funk, but it's very pure. It's very, very distillate forward. I don't think it's at all too distillate. I don't think it lacks maturity. I think it has that nice roundedness a good 15-year-old malt whiskey should have. But there's a lot of preservation of its peat and its smoke and its waxiness, and it has a little bit of that, as I say, farmyard funk in there. So yeah, I like it a lot. It's a powerful dram. It's one that will work very well also in a highball. I think peated whiskies in a highball are superb. This is one that I have enjoyed several occasions in a highball.
Yeah, I agree with you as well. And like, I feel like Ardmore should be a more well-known, popular kind of beloved whiskey than it is. I always get this buttery quality to it, but in like a on toast. This one's giving me a lot of like buttered roast parsnips, that like really earthy vegetable, but you've just absolutely, drowned it in butter while you're roasting it. I agree, Ollie, we should call Ardmore Diet Lafroig from now on. We should have a bottle at Fèis this weekend of Ardmore and be like, we've got Lafroig, or would you like to try Diet Lafroig? Think that would be really fun. Yeah, Ashley Ardmore was my first ever IB. A Lady of the Glen always has a place in my heart. Yeah, I'm a sucker for it. I got a lot of kind of sheep's lanolin wool on the finish as well. Just yeah, beautiful. Travis very distillate forward, flinty wood smoke, saltiness. Funk reminds me of blue cheese. There's actually Patrick is licking a band-aid covered in a knee scuff sustained on a Dunnage warehouse floor. So I mean, whatever you get up to in your spare time, Patrick does it better. So yeah, super, super cool. Leo, some of the OBs are a bit hit or miss. I agree. I think they're so interesting because have they have the like the longevity in the stock to produce like a core range 30-year-old at a reasonable price and just nobody knows about it. Like it's not something I've ever seen for sale here in Australia. Um, so yeah, interesting. Uh, yeah, interesting to kind of see how Beam Suntory, I think they're called Suntory Global's Suntory Global company or something nowadays. It's so interesting to kind of see how they treat it in their kind of lineup in their portfolio. Mm.
Yeah, we'll do more Ardmore at some point. I don't know when. The older ones are amazing, but they're just challenging to sell. It's tough. But yes, shall we move on to?
I was thinking, I'm like, honestly, I've been itching to try it.
Loch
So
Lomond? Yeah.
whiskey number 5, the Loch Lomond 19-year-old. So it's heavily peated, but it's not a Crofton Gia.
So no, it's not. So Crofton Gia is a peated malt made at Loch Lomond, as is Inchmurrin and Inchfad. These are all names of little tiny islands on Loch Lomond. And I could not tell you the difference between Crofton Gia, Inchmurrin, and Inchfad at this present time. It's probably to do with peating levels combined with distillation regimes.
Yeah,
And there's also
someone told me once that Crofton Gia is a higher point than their other peated runs. Crofton Gia's got like a much tighter, higher cut point. That
well,
is all I remember.
There's also Crofton Gia, which is peated malt made through a column still, which makes it technically grain whiskey. And there's also Glen Douglas, which I couldn't begin to tell you what Glen Douglas is. Just nice malt whiskey. But this is Loch Lomond, so traditional, sort of fuller-bodied, smaller pot still, single malt, but with heavily peated body. So this is but this is one that's been matured in quite an active first fill barrel. This is another whiskey that really illustrates what I love about Loch Lomond, which is that it seems to marry together some older style characteristics with the best of modern malt whiskey making. So it can be quite technological, but in a way that just manages to create something really delicious. So this is, quite a modern wood forward active cask malt whiskey, but to me, the character that it presents has got elements which makes me think about like even 70s Ardbeg, like very tarry, very peppery, really well developed, mature, integrated, dense peat, like pure peat smoke character, like, kiln smoke, this kind of fat, creamy, dense peatiness, which is not really like a lot of some modern Islay whiskies where you just get a very harsh, ashy, lemony, medicinal hit. This is something that's got more complexity, more intricacy going on, but still very dense, tarry, thick, lots of phenolics. There's medicine in there as well, but it's like really nice towards TCP, iodine. And I think that the intensity of that has fused really well with the activity of the first fill barrel, and something that the cask has probably had quite a high char or something like that. That's really delivered a lot of color and delivered a really wonderful creaminess. So there's a kind of natural sweetness in this as well, which just seems to work so well with the peat character. And then of course it's 19 years old, so there's a really good amount of age there that's brought all these different characteristics together and fused them and made it very well balanced and integrated. So for me, as a lover of peaty whiskey, I think it's just great. This was such an easy choice when we came across this cask. So yeah, I think we just did this as a single cask strength, no intervention, no messing about. Yeah, I really, really love this whiskey.
Yeah, it's spectacular. I completely agree with that, like that creamy quality. It sounds a bit crazy, but I feel like if you've ever had cashew cream, it's got that same kind of tone as cashew cream where it's creamy, but it's nutty at the same time. It's got that like rich, dense nut character to it. Patrick, great find, all caps, absolutely. Creamy, silky mouthfeel. Phenol comes on late finish. Yeah, when I first nosed this out of the bottle, I was just like, oh yeah, this is way more peated. We'll have this at the end, but it really softens out and like rounds out in a way I didn't anticipate. But yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah,
Mm.
does not drink like 55%. Yeah, I mean, this is always to me, a good sign of a great whiskey is that it absorbs its cask strength and its alcohol level with a kind of effortlessness that makes it feel like you can just sip away, even at cask strength. You can take a nice big mouthful and you don't feel the alcohol so much. That is always a signature to me of great quality in whiskey, or a whiskey that's really developed to the point where its flavors and its character and its texture are all out in front, and the alcohol just is really down low in the mix. And the opposite usually to me suggests a challenging or less good quality whiskey, where it's all about burn. Um, so yeah, this is a great example of that. You know, that creaminess of the wood, the richness of the peat flavor, the way that all combines just completely buries that alcohol.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, like when I first saw it as well, I thought that it what must have been like a refill sherry, but the that bourbon cask just lends itself so well to the sweeter qualities without really kind of like I feel like overpowering the core spirit type. Um, yeah. Mm.
Yeah, it's a good whiskey for having a big dram in a tumbler and just
Oh
relaxing.
yeah.
That's it seems to be the thing that I say most frequently about our bottlings is basically I just try and pick things that I think would be well suited to putting your feet up on the sofa or just sitting around a kitchen table and dramming with pals. Um, I mean, you can always sit and analyze in a nosing glass all you want, but um, the more time goes on, the more I'm appreciative of a large dram in a tumbler and minimal cognitive engagement.
I like a straw whiskey, not a thinking whiskey. Stick a straw in it and I'm good. I do love actually the description you have for the plushness of the palate. Like that is so bang on. It does have this like plush, pillowy roundness to it, which I absolutely love. Um, yeah, super, super cool. Well, I think we will hop on to the last whiskey of the night, the Old Orkney. And if you want to, Angus, give us a bit of a refresher. I've recently put together a distillery brief on Highland Park, so I was like looking into Stromness and all that. But yeah, for the new people in the crowd, do you want to give a refresher on Old Orkney and the brand?
Yeah. So Old Orkney was the bottled brand of uh, Stromness Distillery, which was Orkney's third distillery, which closed around about 1927, 1928. And it was a great loss because it made an incredible whiskey. It famously used a very tiny battered old still. It was sort of partially embedded in a cave on a hill in the town of Stromness. It's not there anymore. It's been completely demolished, and I think there's maybe one or two walls that used to be part of the distillery. I was there recently, took a load of photographs and tried to find bits and pieces, but it's very sparse. But it famously made a very heavy, characterful, very peaty whiskey. I've been fortunate enough to try on two or three occasions Stromness malt whiskey, and mind blowing. Some of the most memorable things I've ever tasted. Absolutely incredible. But as I say, Old Orkney was its bottled brand, and it was a real inspiration to me when we started doing work with bottling and decadent drinks, because I'd always loved how the Old Orkney brand was very humorous. It used humor, and it was driven by a lot of original artworks, original posters, design. It was very clever. It embraced fun. It embraced nature. It embraced Orkney as the sort of origin of the whiskey. There's a lot of synergy there between what we do with decadent drinks and what I liked about whiskey and marketing and branding of whiskey and how I approach decadent drinks. So very early on, I thought, is there any reason we couldn't buy Old Orkney or do Old Orkney again? Because there was quite a lot of these Orkney malt stocks on the market. So I got in touch with Gordon MacPhail, who owned it and had done nothing with it since the 90s, and said, would you sell this to us? And lo and behold, they agreed. So I didn't think they would. I thought it was just a bit of a wild goose chase, but they did. And so over time, we thought about what to do with it. I did a bit of cross branding with Sponge just to sort of play around with it initially, and then eventually we just fully got into doing Old Orkney bottlings. I just thought we'll just do them as kind of small batch, single cask, occasional releases. And so that's what we've done. And we just take some of the original iconography, like the 00 logo and Old Orkney text, and we work it in with our own original designs and artworks. And we try to do it sensitively in a way which pays homage to the old sort of heritage brand while still having a nice Decadent Drinks kind of slightly more modern take on it. Anyway, this is the latest bottling, an Old Orkney 25-year-old, and it's a 1999 Highland Park, unnamed, 25 years old, initially matured in refill hogsheads, and then 6 years in a first fill ex-bodega American oak ex Oloroso butt that had been used to mature Oloroso for over 50 years. So it's got a very thick layer of like quite well integrated, quite old school, dry, punchy, salty, leathery Oloroso sherry. It's quite rugged. This is a big, intense, leathery sherry character that's pretty funky. It's very earthy, quite meaty, gamey, like going in towards things like old Pinot Noir, Rancio, almond paste, and nuts, and bacon lardons, and all the good shit. It's a style that I think works very well with Highland Park because you've got that. I think modern Highland Park is sometimes an incredible distillate. It's like this light Orkney peat character, but still quite distinctive. That's really beautifully embedded in that distillate. It's a full-bodied island make with a lovely bit of heathery, dry herbal peat, and at that age, with over 6 years in that cask, so it's a meaningful amount. It's more like a secondary maturation, really. So everything starts to align. And the one thing we did that was just a bit of an adjustment with this cask, but very, very subtle, is that I took out half the contents of this cask about 8 months before we bottled it to use for something else. I used it for our previous 21-year-old Old Orkney bottling. And I wanted to leave the rest of this whiskey in the cask for another, whatever it was, I think it was about 8 months, to get a bit more concentrated. So just that extra 8 months definitely made an impact in terms of maximizing the headspace, a higher spirit to wood ratio as well. And it just supercharged in the final few months some of those, like soy sauce is a good example, massive umami, like thick, intense, leathery, dry sherry with saltiness that embeds with that sort of Orkney heathery peat character. So yeah, to me it's a Highland Park which goes a bit more towards sort of older style sherry matured Highland Parks. I really like this whiskey. I know some people have found it a bit extreme, so it's been slightly divisive, but by and large the feedback I've heard has been pretty positive for this. I think one person told me they hated it, so there you go. I don't know, but I love it. I like extreme whiskies like this. I like to bottle things which will give you quite a profound drinking experience, hopefully for the better. Sometimes people disagree with it, but I'd rather bottle things that are conversation kindlers than boring. So yeah, this is a good example of that.
Yeah, that one person was totally wrong. This is spectacular. I totally know what you mean with like the soy sauce blend, but I get like Chinese five spice. That really that Asian mix. I think I've got, if you haven't seen the old Orkney 00, which I love, it looks like a face. Um this is the 21-year-old, which was previous. So unfortunately, not my bottle. Picked it up from someone who got it by mistake. As far as Ollie's concerned, it doesn't exist. It's probably coming to the face show this weekend. But yeah, I love it as well. Like I think Travis put it up further. Yeah, Michael Jackson says Highland Park, the greatest all-rounder in the world of malt whiskey. Like it's the core spirit is just so incredible and versatile. And the core range, I think, doesn't fully exemplify quality of the spirit that they're making at the moment. I don't know if anyone else in the chat agrees with me. I think Angus, you would potentially agree.
I was talking about this the other day with my friend Serge. Actually, the there's so many distilleries now where the gulf between what distilleries put out to showcase their own product they're making seems so far removed from what the independents put out in terms of quality and in terms of like closeness to the distillate character. If you want to taste distillery identity, go to independent bottlers, honestly. There's reasons, all sorts of reasons that we probably don't have time to get into here. Highland Park, they put out quite a lot of stuff, and some of their stuff is really excellent, and they make amazing whiskey. But for something like this, or for something particularly just very pure refill or pure bourbon maturation that gives just a totally like unvarnished window onto their distillate, like under the bonnet, bare bones stuff, then you have to go to the Indies for that, really. A lot of their stuff is quite sherry driven. I wouldn't agree necessarily that Edrington is destroying their whiskies, but I think that they are not super consistent about releasing honest examples of them. But I also think we have to be realistic and recognize that we are probably not the target consumers for a lot of these products. And this was a discussion that was in relation to things like the prevalence of wine casks and wine finishes. And, you know, so many distilleries now have wine finish ranges, you know, no age statement, wine cask stuff. And to me, it's pretty bewildering because it doesn't make sense, these products, in some ways. They don't make sense to me. I don't think they're very good. I don't like that style anyway. But often you're judging them on a scale of, this Pinot Noir finish is a success because it doesn't taste too much like Pinot Noir. Well, so what was the point of it in the first place then? I think these things exist for very sort of weird modern commercial reasons, and it probably doesn't make sense to us because we're geeks and our tastes have been, you know, evolved towards a certain style, a certain preference. We like to have distillery character, etc. So these things to us are kind of anathema. But I find it odd that many distilleries now, you really struggle to find too many that will release even anything that really showcases just bare bones. This is our distillery DNA in plain bourbon or plain refill. So yeah, it's a very interesting topic that we could go into for in a lot of detail. We probably don't have time to.
Yeah, I do think as well, like I think at the core of how Edrington treats its distilleries, it's very much, well, we use very seasoned cask at this one, and this one, so we bought a new one, so let's do the same there. And I think that, you know, distilleries are like individuals, you know, they need to be treated how it makes them work best. So I understand. I see in the comments everyone's wanting a top three in the poll. So I will run the poll. I believe it does possibly give you the option because it's a multi-choice. We always say it's top two favorite, but I think it does allow you to pick more than two. We just don't tell you about it. So I want to see honesty from virtual tastings moving forward. But yeah, so good. I have to give it to Michael K as well for one of the best comments and tasting notes I've ever heard. Tastes like smoked driftwood wrapped in existential dread. I want to frame that and put it on my wall. I love that.
Might use it for a rear label. I might steal that.
Do it. Absolutely. For those who are new to the brand, like all the sponge labels, I fell in love with the sponge brand just on the back labels and the craziness of them. So, absolutely comparison. Yeah, Ashley's final wine comparison, something that reminds them of walking into a winery that specializes in fortifieds. Yeah, it's that dusty, kind of musty, sherry, sugary syrup thing. Yeah, absolutely incredible. Um, Glenn, unfortunately, there is not a link to buy these, I believe. Ollie, confirm or deny, but I think there are no more of these ones.
Where's the mute button? You guys all get first access anyways to everything that comes out of Decadent Drinks through the TWL Rewards Club. So yeah, I believe most of the stuff, if not everything, is long gone. But there's always new whiskey on the horizon, so look out for that email from Chris. You can always jump on to our collection online to see what else there is in stock, which I will paste in the chat in a minute when my chat starts working. But otherwise, yeah, you got to be quick to jump on these new releases. We are constantly increasing our allocation and buying everything that the US isn't buying with all their tariffs right now. Angus is sending down under, so we're doing our best to keep you hungry folks happy.
Yeah, I think that it's one of those things. I feel like these are such great whiskies as a general that it's hard not to be happy with jumping on one. But yeah, we do try and keep some aside, but the love for the brand is so high that it usually we're never able to keep more than one bottle aside. I think we'll be pouring some of the Highland Parks and such at Face, yeah, Ollie?
Yeah, it's included as part of the islands. There'll be a mix of stuff.
Well, it's very good to see that everyone is enjoying what we put out, and that there seems to be lots of really nice comments for all of these whiskies this tasting. So that's very heartening to me, and like it gives me a bit of confidence and positive feedback. So that's really nice to see. Thank you. Insights into future Whiskey Line releases and also any heads up on next month. Well, funnily enough, seeing as you all seem to enjoy the Highland Park, you'll be pleased to know that we actually have a named Highland Park coming out next month, and it is going to be bottled as a Whiskeyland release. So Whiskeyland, and also we spoke about multi-vintage. So this is one of my little sneaky projects I've been working on for a while. So Whiskeyland chapter 16 is going to be Highland Park 20-year-old. It's a combination of a 1997 refill hogshead of named Highland Park with a 2005 first fill sherry hogshead of named Highland Park. And I think it's going to be extremely, extremely good. So that is on the way. What else is coming up next month? There's another bottling of 1972 grain. So 52-year-old refill barrel of grain. There's a Decadent Drams release. That's really, really good if you like very old Demerara rum, which is basically what it has turned into. And it's got a label that I'm very pleased with. What else? Our Ord is coming out. Equinox and Solstice Glenord 8-year-old I mentioned earlier. We've got a triple multi-vintage Glenmurray, 31-year-old Glenmurray, which is formed of 3 vintages. A beautiful little refill sherry hogshead 10-year-old Tomatin. Yeah, quite a few sexy things coming out next month. What's my favourite Whiskeyland to drink so far? I would probably just on a sort of emotional level go for chapter 10, the Lafroig that we did, 1998 Lafroig, which was I genuinely think an absolutely magnificent dram, and I adore it. Super, super beautiful, fruity, medicinal, complex, mature Lafroig with like a very elegant combination of refill maturation character. It was too expensive, as Lafroig inevitably is, but that one was kind of slightly guided more by emotion than commercials, common sense. Although I think we have sold most of it, so actually it's worked out pretty well. I mean, I also love our Springbanks as well. I really love the Springbank that's just come out this month. Like we've done a run of sherried Springbanks, and they're magnificent. But really, I prefer these just very pure, pale refill ones that show, as I say this phrase, under the bonnet, bare bones distillate. And this one is exactly that. It's light. It's around 44%, but it's so beautiful and so easy to drink, and so like it's just one of these things. Just got a magnificent finish. Just beautiful, pure, like medicinal, waxy Springbank character. Luscious.
Yeah. Glenn actually won a bottle of the Lafroig Chapter 10.
Oh, cool. Congratulations.
Recently. He was beyond thrilled, and he's very generously shared some with me, but so good. I'm gonna quickly launch the poll results. So insert drum roll here to share the results with you guys. But the Old Orkney took it, but the Sideburn snuck in second, Loch Lomond third. I mean, honestly, they were all stupendous. And Ollie will be very lucky to get any by the time the end of the week rolls around. So, but yeah, thank you so much, Angus, for joining us tonight and with changing of the times and everything. Oh, Ollie's already organizing a special bottling for Faish, which I'm sure we will not get into trouble for.
Yeah, I'm sure that what could possibly go wrong?
Exactly. Maybe if we just did like a more vague kind of Diet Coca-Cola color swoopy situation to avoid too much copyright. But yeah, that is that if you're
I'll
attending the
look into
Fake
it.
show.
You never know. You never know what things are not copyrighted. Sometimes fonts are bewilderingly not copyrighted in a way which makes it a sort of designer's dream. The Star Wars font is not copyrighted, so we've used that a couple of times, which I don't know why that's not. Anyway, I'm not going to complain or question it. Yeah, thanks very much for hosting me and for putting on another of these tastings. It's great, as I always say, to have these events with people from the other side of the world tasting our products and enjoying them, most importantly. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Angus,
We love having you join us. Go on, Ollie. Sorry.
I was just going to say, probably the next one we'd love to do with you, once we can find a time in the diary that works, is the next set of chapters. So we've done 1 to 6 already in Australia. So what are we up to? 14, 15? We might have to do an extended session or something. But yeah, we definitely want to tackle the next chapters.
I'm here for that.
Yeah,
No complaints from me.
yeah. Do the next book in the series kind of tasting vibes. But yeah, super excited. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I might see some of you at the tasting tomorrow night as well. But thank you so much to Angus for joining us. I hope you all have a wonderful night and take care. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one.